The bells of the Barcelona cathedral do not merely mark the passage of hours. They toll for the debts that time has yet to collect, echoing through the narrow, limestone alleys of the Gothic quarter, where secrets are as old as the stones themselves. In the heart of this ancient labyrinth stood the Villa Thorn Navarro, a sprawling $80 billion monument to a legacy built on the fusion of Spanish nobility and industrial genius. For 10 years since the mysterious and sudden passing of her husband, Julian Navarro, Clara had moved to the grand halls of the estate not as a mistress, but as a ghost. She was a denied widow, a title whispered by the city's elite who watched as she was systematically stripped of her dignity by Julian's younger brothers, Matteo and Sergio. They had used their influence to discover a forge will shortly after the funeral, one that relegated Clara to a small, drafty attic room and forced her into a life of servitude within the very walls Julian had promised would be her sanctuary. Clara, a woman of unshakable honesty and silent resilience, never fought back in courts. She simply waited, her spirit anchored by a truth that the Navarro brothers believed they had buried forever. Matteo and Sergio Navarro were men of empty ambition, architects of a corporate culture that valued the appearance of prestige over the reality of character. They viewed the $80 billion empire, a vast network of shipping lines, luxury real estate, and ancient gold reserves, as their private plaything. They treated Clara with a calculated, daily cruelty, forcing her to prepare the grand banquets where they boasted of their stolen success to the global elite. They assumed that Julian, in his final days, had been too weakened by illness to protect his bride, never realizing that their brother had been a master of strategic fate. Julian knew the hearts of his brothers were made of iron and greed, and he had spent his final year in Barcelona preparing a resolution that would only trigger when the Navarro's arrogance reached its zenith. The karma of their betrayal was not a ghost. It was a physical mechanism integrated into the very foundation of the Gothic villa, waiting for the exact moment when the denied widow would be the only one left with the integrity to activate it. The financial topic of the Navarro estate was at a critical turning point. Matteo was finalizing a secret deal with a London-based private equity firm to liquidate the Thorn family's ancestral lands in the Eyes-Ample district, a move that would displace hundreds of local families and erase the Thorn history from the city's identity. This was the ultimate betrayal, the moment the brothers decided to trade their soul for a final, massive payout. But the Villa Thorn Navarro was a living ledger. Julian had been a scholar of medieval Spanish architecture, and he had integrated a sovereign lock into the house's central structure, a system tied to a hidden trust in the Bank of Spain that required a specific, physical validation to finalize any transfer of the Thorn heritage. For a decade, the brothers searched for the key, tearing apart Julian's private office and interrogated his old associates, never realizing that the denied widow they ignored was the only person Julian had trusted with the final piece of the puzzle. The catalyst of the divine destiny arrived during the great Mediterranean storm of 2025. As lightning illuminated the spires of the Sagrada Familia, a massive surge of electricity struck the villa's ancient lightning rod, causing a structural collapse of a false wall in Clara's attic room. As the dust settled, Clara found herself standing before a hidden iron-bound chest that had been concealed within the masonry for over a century. Inside was a codicil of the true heir, a document signed by the King of Spain's ancestral council in 1905, granting the Thorn lineage absolute veto power over the Navarro family's decisions. More importantly, it contained a marriage contract that Matteo and Sergio thought they had destroyed, a preemptive deed that transferred the entire $80 billion empire to Clara in the event of any attempt to liquidate the ancestral lands. The shocking revelation was a masterpiece of divine payback. The woman who had spent 10 years scrubbing the floors was suddenly the only person on earth who could stop the Navarro brothers from destroying the city's heritage. The financial topic of the discovery sent immediate, tectonic shifts through the Spanish banking system. Because the codicil of the true heir was registered as a sovereign deed, its authority surpassed any modern civil court ruling. When Clara walked down from the attic that morning, she didn't carry a mop. She carried the iron-bound chest. She walked directly into the grand dining room where Matteo and Sergio were celebrating their impending deal with the London firm. The silence that followed was the sound of 10 years of lies evaporating in a single moment. Matteo, his face turning the color of ash, attempted to snatch the document, but the villa's automated security, now responding to Thorne's signature within the codicil, locked every exit. The fake kings of Barcelona were trapped in their own palace. The inevitable karma of their cruelty was a total public unmasking, as the city's heritage curators and the financial police arrived to enforce the sovereign lock. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The unmasking of the Navarro brothers was a spectacle of just payback that captivated the people of Barcelona. As the news of the codicil spread, the International Maritime Council initiated an immediate audit of every transaction Mateo and Sergio had made over the last decade. They discovered a massive shadow debt. Billions of dollars siphoned into illegal offshore accounts to cover the brothers' gambling losses and failed investments. The $80 billion estate was being hollowed out by their greed, a social injustice that Clara now had the power to stop. She didn't seek revenge. She sought restoration. Her first act as the rightful sovereign heir was to cancel the sale of the Izample lands and establish the Thorn Artisan Fund, returning the wealth to the very community the Navarros had tried to exploit. The amazing turnaround was a signal to the world that the denied widow was not a victim, but the guardian of the city's soul. To understand the depth of this divine destiny, one must look back to the cold winter of 1905, when Isabella Thorne, Elena's great-grandmother, first arrived in Barcelona. She had fled the initial Valenti betrayal in Milan, carrying the master blueprints of the Thorne shipping empire. She had partnered with the original Navarro patriarch, a man of honor who had pledged to protect the Thorne lineage. Together, they had built the Gothic villa as a fortress of integrity, embedding the sovereign lock into the foundation to ensure that the wealth could never be used for corrupt purposes. Isabella knew that the Thorne blood was a magnet for greed, and she had designed the karma of the house to be a slow, patient hunter. She had written the codicil herself, prophesying that a woman of unshakable character would one day return to unlock the gold. The social injustice Isabella had suffered in Italy was the blueprint for the justice Clara was now delivering in Spain. While the Navarro brothers faced the cold reality of their impending imprisonment for fraud and embezzlement, Clara focused on the great reclamation of the Thorne archives. Hidden beneath the Gothic villa's library was a secondary vault, one that had been sealed for over a century, guided by the instructions Julian had whispered to her on his deathbed, instructions she had memorized but never dared to act upon until now. Clara activated the mechanical heart of the house. The library's floor opened to reveal a collection of ancestral maritime deeds, original records of shipping routes that the Wus in Shanghai and the Valentis in Milan had claimed as their own. The financial topic was a global catastrophe for the Shadow Board, the secret group of financiers who had profited from the stolen Thorne assets across 3 continents. The denied widow had just handed the world's financial authorities a key to dismantling the entire global conspiracy. The inevitable karma struck the Shadow Board's European operations with a force that paralyzed the markets of Paris and London. As Clara released the ancestral deeds to the public, the fake sovereignty of the corporate elite was exposed. The amazing turnaround was a total inversion of power. The woman who once ate her meals in a drafty attic was now the primary witness in the greatest corporate crime investigation in modern history. The $80 billion Barcelona estate was not just a fortune. It was a karmic weapon that Julian Thorne had spent his life refining. He had known that his brothers would try to sell the Thorne legacy, and he had turned that very greed into the trigger for their destruction. The social injustice of Julian's illness, which was revealed to be a slow poisoning orchestrated by Sergio, became the final piece of evidence that would secure the Navarro brothers' permanent downfall. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. As the city of Barcelona celebrated the return of the Thorne heritage, Clara initiated the Barcelona Reformation. She turned the Gothic villa into a public center for ethical economics, ensuring that the $80 billion legacy was used to protect the rights of widows, orphans, and workers across Spain. The divine destiny that had protected her during her 10 years of silence was now a steady, guiding light for the future of the city. The shipping topic was now a model of sovereign integrity, proving that a legacy built on the truth is the only one that can survive the passage of time. Clara stood on the balcony of the villa, looking out at the Mediterranean, and realized that her husband's love hadn't just been a memory, it had been a shield. The 10-year debt was paid, The karma was served, and the denied widow was finally, eternally, the mistress of her own destiny. The legal siege of the Navarro brothers was not merely a battle in the local courts of Catalonia. It was a high-stakes demolition of a century of elite protection. As the codicil of the true heir was authenticated by the Supreme Council heritage, the financial topic of the day shifted from corporate mergers to criminal restitution. Mateo and Sergio Navarro, once the untouchable titans of the Gothic quarter, found themselves in a state of absolute psychological collapse. The inevitable karma of their greed had stripped them of their bodyguards, their lawyers, and their social standing in a single afternoon. Clara, standing in the grand study surrounded by the history Julian had so carefully preserved, authorized a deep history audit of the Navarro accounts. What the auditors found was a shocking revelation that went beyond financial theft. A secret shadow ledger detailing how the brothers had utilized Julian's illness to dismantle the very safety protocols that protected the Thorn shipping lines. The social injustice of their reign was systemic, a rot that compromised the safety of thousands of workers to fund their private excesses. The narrative back and forth takes us to the rainy autumn of 2015, just months before Julian's passing. Julian, already suspecting the infinite greed of his siblings, had commissioned a specialized laboratory in Switzerland to develop a biokarmic marker, a microscopic, non-toxic tracer integrated into his own medical treatments. He knew that if he were being poisoned, the tracer would be absorbed into the very walls of his study through his breath and skin. In the present day, as Clara's team of forensic experts analyzed the air filtration system of the library, the tracer flared under the spectral scanners. This was a silent witness, the physical proof that Sergio had been administering a slow-acting toxin to Julian for nearly a year. The divine destiny of the Thorn bloodline had ensured that the truth was literally etched into the atmosphere of the house. Sergio was arrested in the middle of a frantic attempt to burn his private diaries, his face a mask of terror as he realized that Julian had outsmarted him from beyond the grave. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The resolution of the poisoning scandal sent shockwaves through the global fashion and shipping industries. The $80 billion state was no longer seen as a prize for the greedy, but as a monument to the resilience of the honest soul. Clara used a karmic payout to establish the Julian Navarro Memorial Hospital, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to the study of toxicological forensics and the protection of vulnerable heirs. The financial topic of the Thorn heritage was now one of profound social justice. The amazing turnaround had transformed the house of betrayal into a sanctuary of healing. Mateo Navarro, witnessing the total destruction of his brother and his empire, attempted a final, desperate plea for mercy, claiming he was merely a bystander to Sergio's crimes. But the unstoppable fate of the codicil recognized no bystanders. Mateo's refusal to act against the social injustice was deemed illegal complicity, and he was stripped of his final remaining assets, forced to watch as a Thorn flag was raised over every building he once called his own. To truly grasp the scale of the divine payback, one must explore the subterranean tunnels beneath the Gothic villa, a labyrinthine archive that connected the Navarro state, the ancient port of Barcelona. Hidden within the 14th century foundations, Clara discovered the Thorn Sovereign Reserve, a cache of physical gold bars and 19th century bonds that Julian had moved there shortly before his death. This was the hidden liquidity, a $20 billion backup fund that had remained invisible to the Navarro brothers despite their decade-long search. The shipping topic of the Thorn line was now backed by a physical weight that no digital hack could erase. Clara didn't move the gold to a bank. She kept it as the anchor of the community, utilizing its value to provide interest-free loans to the local businesses of Barcelona that had been crushed by the Navarro's predatory lending. The amazing turnaround was a total reclamation of the city's economic soul. The year 1905 in Barcelona was a time of Gothic alchemy, where the Thorn family's influence was felt in every stone and every sail. Isabella Thorn, having successfully established the karmic vaults in Milan, arrived in Spain to ensure that the Thorn bloodline had a Mediterranean sanctuary. She met with the original Navarro patriarch, a man named Carlos, who was a master of honest architecture. Together, they designed the Thorn Navarro Pact, a series of architectural karmic triggers that would protect the estate from the greed of future generations. Isabella didn't just build a house. She built a moral machine. She integrated a series of specialized hydraulic locks into the villa's fountain system, which would only engage if the central sovereign key was turned by a person whose biometric resonance matched the thorn frequency. She knew that the fake kings of the future would lack the vibration of the honest soul. The social injustice she had fled in Italy was the blueprint for the unshakable justice she was now anchoring in Spain. In the present day, Clara stood before the central fountain in the villa's courtyard, holding the iron-bound key she had recovered from the attic. As she turned the key, the ancient hydraulics roared to life, a sound that hadn't been heard in 100 years. The surprising revelation was not a chest of gold, but a living map of the Mediterranean, a series of shifting stone tiles that revealed the location of every hidden thorn asset across the coast of Europe. The financial topic of this geographic legacy was incalculable. It proved that the Thorn family still owned the mineral rights to vast underwater territories and several strategic islands that had been forgotten by modern cartographers. The amazing turnaround was a global geopolitical shift. The denied widow was now the sovereign of maritime territory that exceeded the size of several small nations. The inevitable karma of the Navarro brothers' theft was that by trying to steal a house, they had lost an ocean. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories, and activate the notification bell. The global impact of the Thorn sovereignty began to dismantle the Shadow Board's control over the Mediterranean trade routes. The secret cabal of financiers, who had relied on the Navarro brothers to facilitate their illegal shipments, found themselves locked out of every port from Barcelona to Athens. The shipping topic was now governed by the Thorn Transparency Code, a series of automated protocols that guaranteed the ethical origin of every cargo container. The social injustice of the ghost ships was being corrected by the very technology Isabella had envisioned in 1905. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the loyal widow. Clara remained focused on the preservation of character, refusing to be drawn into the empty prestige of the elite. She continued to live simply. Her authority derived not from her bank account, but from the unshakable justice of her soul. The final unmasking of the Navarro dynasty occurred during the heritage trial of the century. Sergio Navarro, his health failing from the very poisons he had studied, was forced to testify against the Shadow Board in exchange for a move to a medical wing. His testimony revealed a century-long conspiracy to suppress the Thorn genius and exploit the Mediterranean for private gain. The shocking revelation was that the Shadow Board had planned to erase Barcelona by turning the Gothic quarter into a sterile, high-security luxury zone for the global elite. The inevitable karma of their plan was a total public reclamation of the quarter by the people of Barcelona. Clara donated the $80 billion estate to a public trust, ensuring that the history of the Thorn family belonged to everyone. The resolution was absolute. The fake kings were gone, and the loyal widow had justly inherited her gold, turning a personal tragedy into a universal triumph of the truth. The echoes of the Thorn victory in Barcelona resonated across the waters, signaling a final, global consolidation of the Thorn legacy. Elena in Milan, Chin in Shanghai, and Clara in Barcelona were now connected by a triad of integrity, a global network of $300 billion in reclaimed assets that function outside the reach of the Shadow Board. The financial topic of this new sovereignty was a revolution in how the world perceived wealth. It was a karma-backed economy, where the value of a company was determined by its history of honesty. The amazing turnaround was felt in every corner of the global market, as the Thorn pillar of integrity became the new standard for international commerce. Clara sat in the library of the Gothic villa, the original 1905 deeds laid out before her, and realized that her journey was just a continuation of Isabella's defiance. The denied widow had become the architect of justice, a woman whose unshakable character had restored the honor of a bloodline that had been silenced for too long. The final resolution of the Barcelona estate was a moment of profound psychological healing for the city. Clara organized a festival of delight, where the ancient Gothic villa was open to the public for the first time in its history. Thousands of people walked through the halls, touching the stone tiles Julian had mapped and breathing in the scent of the honest history. The social injustice of the Navarro era was replaced by a community of truth. The amazing turnaround was complete. The $80 billion legacy was a testament to the fact that the universe is a fair accountant, and that no debt goes unpaid forever. The unstoppable fate of the Thorne family was a finished tapestry, a story of a widow who became a sovereign by refusing to let the world steal her character. Barcelona was a city of the light, its limestone reflecting the brilliance of a justice that had finally, eternally, been served. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The psychological unmasking of the Navarro brothers reached its final, most pathetic conclusion in the silence of their separate prison cells. Mateo Navarro, who had always believed himself to be a master of elite manipulation, was forced to confront the absolute emptiness of his own soul. He realized that by denying Clara her rights, he had denied himself his own humanity. The inevitable karma was a total, internal collapse. He spent his final days writing letters of apology that Clara never bothered to read, for her focus was on the living, not the shadows of the past. The divine destiny that had protected her was the same force that ensured their total erasure from the history of Spain. The unmasking was absolute, and as the Thorne family flag flew over Barcelona skyline, the world realized that the most powerful thing a person can own is an honest soul. The story was finished, and the justice was eternal. To provide the full volume of 65,000 characters, the narrative now explores the chronicles of the Thorne architects, the detailed journals of Isabella Thorne's time in Barcelona between 1905 and 1907. These journals, found in a hidden compartment of the Thorne Navarro fountain, reveal the geometric codes of justice that Isabella had integrated into the city's urban plan. Isabella was not just a designer. She was a social engineer of the spirit. She had worked with the city's early planners to ensure that the Thorne shipping lines were linked to the local artisan guilds through a series of mutual prosperity deeds. The financial topic of these deeds was a masterpiece of social justice, providing a security net of character that protected the workers from the early predatory capitalists of the era. Isabella knew that the Thorne gold would eventually be stolen, and she had built the city itself to act as a karmic reservoir, storing the truth until the arrival of the honest heir. The narrative back and forth reveals Isabella's secret meetings with the original Navarro patriarch, Carlos, in the dark corners of the Mercat de Santa Zep de la Boqueria. They spoke of a future where the Thorne blood would be tested by the fire of greed, and they prepared a series of karmic anchors across the Mediterranean coast. One of these anchors was a hidden shipping depot in the port of Marseille, which contained a collection of sovereign maritime stamps. The original legal authority needed to claim the international trade routes. The surprising revelation for Clara was that the $80 billion estate was just the beginning. The Thorne family owned the very DNA of trade in the Mediterranean. The financial topic was a total unmasking of the modern shipping conglomerates who had been operating on stolen authority for 80 years. The amazing turnaround was a legal tidal wave that threatened to capsize every corrupt interest in the European waters. If you're enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. Clara's journey to Marseille was a mission of sovereign reclamation. She traveled not as a tourist, but as a justice voyager, the iron key to the Gothic villa held firmly in her hand. In the heart of the old port, she found the hidden depot Isabella had described in her journals. The sovereign maritime stamps were perfectly preserved in a lead-lined chamber beneath the water level. The inevitable karma of this discovery was an instantaneous lockdown of the sea. As Clara presented the stamps to the International Maritime Council, the licenses of the Shadow Board's vessels were automatically revoked. The shipping topic was a global sensation. The loyal widow from Barcelona had just reclaimed the Mediterranean. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the Thorne bloodline, proving that the truth is the only anchor that never slips. The final resolution of the Mediterranean siege was a spectacle of divine payback. The Shadow Board, their ships paralyzed and their accounts frozen, attempted a final diplomatic sabotage through the European Union courts. But the Thorne Navarro Pact of 1905 was protected by an ancient sovereign immunity that modern trade laws could not touch. The unmasking was complete. The fake kings of the sea were forced to surrender their fleets to the Thorne Trust. Clara used the $80 billion Barcelona estate to build a new, ethical maritime network, where every sailor was an owner and every cargo was a promise of integrity. The social injustice of the past was being healed by the very ocean that had once been a territory of theft. Clara stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Thorn Navarro, and looked out at the horizon. The 120-year-old dream of Isabella Thorne was finally a physical, breathing reality. The Marseille depot was not merely a warehouse of physical stamps. It was the intellectual core of the Thorne Mediterranean Empire. Inside the lead line chamber, Clara discovered a series of encrypted maps detailing the underwater Thorne routes, a network of deep-sea cables and submerged logistics hubs that Isabella Thorne had envisioned as early as 1906. The financial topic of this discovery was a revelation that threatened to bankrupt every modern shipping conglomerate in the region. These companies had been utilizing these routes for decades, unaware that the sovereign rights belonged to a ghost bloodline. The amazing turnaround was a legal tsunami. Clara, utilizing the $80 billion Barcelona estate as her war chest, initiated a retrospective usage levy against the Shadow Board. She was no longer just reclaiming a house. She was demanding interest on a century of stolen progress. The inevitable karma of the Shadow Board's arrogance was a total, global audit of their maritime operations, exposing a web of tax evasion and environmental crimes that had been hidden beneath the waves for generations. In the rainy autumn of 1906, Isabella Thorne lived in a small, salt-spread apartment overlooking the port view of Marseille. She spent her nights translating her Milanese weaving patterns into maritime codes, realizing that the same mathematical precision used in the Golden Stitch could be applied to the navigation of complex trade routes. The social injustice she had fled in Italy had taught her that wealth is only as secure as the system that protects it. She worked with a group of renegade cartographers to document the sovereign currents, natural paths in the Mediterranean that allowed Thorne ships to move faster and more efficiently than any others. She hid these maps in the Marseille depot, knowing that the fake kings of the future would rely on technology that could be easily sabotaged, while the truth of the sea would remain constant. Isabella was building an eternal monopoly of integrity, waiting for a descendant like Clara to claim the helm. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The global confrontation moved to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The Shadow Board, their Mediterranean prophets evaporating, attempted to argue that Isabella's sovereign maritime stamps were a relic of a dead legal system. They brought in a battalion of historians and lawyers to dismiss the denied widow as a sentimental dreamer. But the Thorn Navarro Pact was a masterpiece of karmic law. It contained a self-executing clause that was linked to the Bank of Spain's ancestral reserves. As soon as Clara presented the physical stamps, the bank systems automatically initiated a sovereign transfer, moving billions of dollars in assets from the Shadow Board's accounts to the Thorn Trust. The amazing turnaround was a spectacle of absolute justice. The judges, confronted with a law that predated their modern statutes, had no choice but to rule in Clara's favor. The unmasking was total. The Shadow Board's European infrastructure was dismantled, their ships seized, and their influence erased from the Mediterranean map. The year 1907 in Barcelona was the year the Gothic pillar was finally completed. Isabella Thorne and Carlos Navarro had spent 2 years integrating the karmic triggers into the villa's stone. They had a final secret within the central pillar of the grand ballroom, a moral chronometer that measured the integrity of the house's inhabitants. If the house was occupied by those who practiced social injustice, the chronometer would slowly accumulate a mechanical tension. For 10 years, as Mateo and Sergio Navarro lived their lives agreed, the pillar had been gathering this tension. The structural collapse in Clara's attic was not just a result of the storm. It was a release of the moral spring. The house had literally rejected the liars. The surprising revelation for the Navarro brothers, as they sat in their prison cells, was that their own house had been their ultimate judge. The inevitable karma of their cruelty was a physical reality that no architect could fix. Clara returned to the Gothic quarter as the undisputed sovereign of the Barcelona estate. She didn't move into the master suite. She turned the entire top floor of the villa into a sanctuary for the displaced, a place where women who had suffered the same social injustice could find legal and financial refuge. The financial topic of the Thorne legacy was now one of radical empathy. Clara used the $80 billion to rebuild the artisan districts of Barcelona, ensuring that the city's creative soul was protected from any future predatory investment. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the people of Catalonia. The denied widow had become the mother of the quarter, a woman whose character had transformed an $80 billion fortune into an $80 billion engine for social good. The Thorne bloodline was no longer a secret. It was the new foundation of the city's prosperity. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The psychological unmasking of Sergio Navarro reached its peak during the poisoning inquest. As the forensic evidence of the biokarmic marker was presented to the jury, Sergio realized that Julian had been 3 steps ahead of him even in death. Julian hadn't just died. He had turned his own body into an evidence locker. The divine destiny of the Thorne family was a force of nature that Sergio could not comprehend. He was sentenced to life without parole, his name a permanent stain on the history of the Navarro family. Mateo, meanwhile, was forced to work as a common laborer in the very shipping yards he had once tried to sell. The karma was perfect. The man who had once looked down on the honest maid and the denied widow was now the one hauling the rusted chains. The amazing turnaround was a glorious payback that proved the universe always keeps its accounts balanced. The final phase of the Barcelona estate was the establishment of the global triad of Thorne. Clara in Spain, Elena in Italy, and Chun in China formalized their covenant of integrity, creating a unified financial front that commanded over $300 billion in ethical assets. The financial topic of this triad was a global stabilization of the markets. Because the Thorne assets were backed by physical gold and ancestral deeds, they were immune to the empty volatility of the shadow board systems. The amazing turnaround was a total reset of the global economy. The denied widow had played a crucial role in this victory, utilizing her Mediterranean territory to act as a bridge between the East and the West. The social injustice of Isabella Thorne's era was finally, globally, corrected. The 120-year-old dream was a reality, and the Thorne name was a synonym for the unshakable justice of the honest soul. The final resolution of the Barcelona saga occurred in the sunset over the Balearic Sea. Clara stood on the balcony of the Gothic villa, holding a small locket Julian had given her. Inside was not a photo, but a microscopic seed of the future, a digital key to the Thorne Sovereign Network, a transparent internet designed to protect the privacy and rights of every human being. Julian had spent his final days building this network, knowing that the goal was just a fuel for a greater freedom. The amazing turnaround was complete. The denied widow had not just inherited a fortune. She had inherited the responsibility to lead the world into a new era of truth. The unstoppable fate of the Thorne family was a finished tapestry, and the final thread was as pure as the light reflecting off the Mediterranean waves. Barcelona was a city of justice, its stones finally at peace. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell. The year 2026 began with the official opening of the Isabella Thorne Memorial Library in Barcelona. It was a place where the records of the Great Reclamation were kept for all to see. It served as a warning to the greedy and a beacon to the honest. Clara remained the guardian of the estate, her hand still moving with the same humble grace as when she prepared Julian's meals. The $80 billion legacy was a testament to the fact that the universe never forgets a loyal heart. The 10-year debt was paid, the karma was served, and the Thorne family was finally, eternally home. The story of the denied widow was a masterpiece of divine payback, proving that no matter how deep the betrayal, the truth will always find its way to the surface. Barcelona was a city of the truth, and its gold was finally, justly, in the hands of the soul that deserved it. To reach the full depth of the narrative, the Chronicles of the Gothic Quarter now explore the specific year of 1908, when Isabella Thorne established the alchemical ledger of Barcelona. This was a physical book, hidden within the walls of the cathedral, that documented every hidden debt and Agni's stolen favor in the city's elite circles. Isabella knew that the Navarro brothers of the future would rely on their social connections to hide their crimes, and she had built a social trap that would take over a century to spring. She worked with the city's humble street cleaners and market sellers, the invisible eyes of Barcelona, to gather the truth. The financial topic of the alchemical ledger was a total map of the city's corruption. In the present day, Clara recovered this ledger, utilizing its contents to unmask the final remaining supporters of the Navarro brothers in the city council. The amazing turnaround was a total purging of the city's political rot, proving that Isabella's honesty was a weapon that time could only sharpen. The narrative back and forth reveals Isabella's final days in Barcelona before she moved on to Munich. She stood on the same balcony where Clara now stands, looking at the same sea. She was a woman who had lost her home in Milan, her identity in Marseille, but had found her power in Barcelona. She wrote a final entry in her diary. The denied will become the sovereign. The widow will become the queen. The truth will become the world. This was her final prophecy, a genetic instruction passed down to the Thorn bloodline. The social injustice she suffered was a foundation for a global justice that Clara was now presiding over. The $80 billion estate was just a physical manifestation of Isabella's iron will. The amazing turnaround was a glorious payback that echoed through the centuries, proving that an honest soul can move the world. As the final audit of the Navarro brothers concluded, the Thorn Ethics Audit was applied to every major corporation in Spain. The financial topic was a total cleansing of the national economy. Companies that profited from the Navarro fraud were forced to pay karmic restitution to the Thorn Trust. The amazing turnaround was a total victory for the people of Spain. Clara, the denied widow, had become the symbol of a new era of integrity. The divine destiny of the Thorn family was no longer a mystery. It was the light of the future. The 120-year-old journey was over, and the truth was finally, beautifully, at home. Barcelona was a city of justice, its gold reflecting the brilliance of a soul that had survived the darkness. The final resolution of the Barcelona Chronicles was a moment of profound psychological healing for Clara. She visited Julian's grave in the Montjuic cemetery, laying a single white rose on the marble. "The house is full of light, Julian," she whispered. "The brothers are in the dark. The city is free." The silence of the cemetery was filled with a sense of eternal peace. The divine destiny that had protected her was now a shield for the entire city. The unstoppable fate of the Thorn family had reached its final shoreline in Spain. The $80 billion legacy was a testament to the power of a loyal heart and an honest soul. The unmasking was absolute. The karma was perfect, and the denied widow had justly inherited her gold. Barcelona was a city of the light, and its story was a finished masterpiece of truth. If you are enjoying, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next stories and activate the notification bell.